Sarah Thompson, a single mother struggling to support her young son, decides to do something selfless in a moment of desperation: donate blood. What she never could have imagined is that this simple act of kindness would place her at the center of a plot that would change her life forever. The next day, an unexpected call from a mysterious lawyer leaves her in shock. What does he want? And why is Sarah caught up in something far bigger than she ever could have imagined? Sarah Thompson's life was anything but easy, but she had a strength that few could truly understand. A single mother, she worked twice as hard to keep up with the bills while still finding time to play with Ethan, her young son. It was a daily challenge, a silent battle against exhaustion and frustration, but she kept going because she knew that her son's smile was worth more than any hardship. Sarah wasn't rich in money, but she was rich in heart, always willing to help others, even when her own hands trembled from exhaustion. One day, while heading home after another long shift at work, something on the television caught her attention. A blood donation campaign flashed across the screen, showing smiling faces and stories of lives saved. She felt a tightness in her chest, the kind of feeling that makes you think, what if it were me or my son in need of help? She didn't hesitate. The next morning, there she was, sitting in an uncomfortable chair at a donation center, a thin needle piercing her vein. Small gestures can make a big difference, she told herself, trying to ignore the buzzing sounds of the room around her. The nurse attending to her was a friendly guy, the kind of person who seemed born to put others at ease. He praised her courage and even cracked a silly joke about vampires needing a vacation. Sarah laughed, even though she didn't really feel like it, and that eased some of the tension. When she left, she felt lighter, as if she had given back to the world just a little of what it had given her. But what Sarah didn't know as she walked home was that this simple act of kindness was about to change her life in ways she could never have imagined. Later that evening, while Ethan played on the living room floor with his plastic cars, Sarah sensed that something in the air felt different, as if the universe was about to deal her an unexpected hand. And in a way, it was. The next day, the phone rang. On the other end of the line, a deep, professional voice introduced himself as Jonathan Harris, an attorney. He spoke quickly, almost as if he were in a hurry, and mentioned something about an urgent matter that needed to be discussed in person. Sarah frowned, confused, but agreed to meet. As she prepared to go to his office, she couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Had she done something wrong? Or was someone in trouble? She had no idea that this meeting would bring to light secrets from the past she would rather have left buried. Sarah learned that day that sometimes the simplest choices can open doors we never imagined. But she would also discover that not all doors lead to good places. Sarah was the kind of person who always tried to see the good in things, even when life seemed determined to test her patience. She worked as a waitress in a busy restaurant, serving hot meals and even warmer smiles to customers who didn't always return the kindness. Some nights, she came home with aching feet and a pounding headache, but Ethan was always there, waiting for her with his toys scattered across the floor and that curious look in his eyes that only children have. He was her reason to keep fighting, even on the days when everything seemed to go wrong. Deep down, Sarah knew that life wasn't fair, but she also knew she couldn't give up. When she saw the blood donation campaign on TV, something inside her clicked. It wasn't the first time she had thought about donating, but she had always found an excuse to put it off. "I'm too tired," she would tell herself. "Maybe next time." But this time was different. Maybe it was the way the woman on the screen spoke about saving lives, or maybe it was the sparkle in her eyes, as if she truly believed the world could be a better place. Sarah decided she wanted to be part of that, even if just a single drop in the ocean. The donation center was only a few blocks from her home, so she walked, enjoying the crisp morning air. Inside, the atmosphere was calm, with people sitting quietly as they waited for their turn. Sarah filled out the forms quickly, answering the health questions honestly. When her turn finally came, the nurse guided her to a chair and began preparing the equipment. "You're brave," he said, smiling. "A lot of people are scared of needles." Sarah shrugged. "It's just a prick. If it can help someone, it's worth it." The man chuckled. "You remind me of my sister. She's the same way, always thinking of others." As the blood slowly flowed through the transparent tube, Sarah let her mind wander. She thought of Ethan, of course, and how fast he was growing. She also thought of her mother, who had passed away years ago, and how she always used to say that the world needed more good people. "It doesn't matter how big or small the gesture is," her mother would say. "What matters is the heart behind it." Sarah felt a pang of longing, but also a sense of pride. She was doing something right, something her mother would have approved of. When she was done, the nurse placed a bandage on her arm and thanked her again. "You saved a life today," he said sincerely. Sarah smiled, a little shy. "I hope so." As she left the center, she felt different, as if she had cleansed a small part of her soul. She didn't know why, but something told her that this simple act carried more meaning than she could comprehend. Back home, Sarah tried to slip back into her normal routine. She made dinner for Ethan, helped him with his homework, and watched an episode of a cartoon with him before tucking him into bed. But as she washed the dishes, she couldn't stop thinking about the donation. Was someone out there receiving her blood at that very moment? Was that person fighting for their life? These thoughts lingered in her mind until the phone rang the next day, bringing with it a whirlwind of news she never could have predicted. Sarah learned that day that sometimes the simplest choices can open doors we never imagined. But she would also discover that not all doors lead to good places. The phone rang in the middle of the afternoon while Sarah was busy trying to balance a stack of bills on the kitchen table. Ethan was playing with wooden blocks on the floor, building towers that collapsed into loud laughter. When the sharp sound cut through the air, she hesitated for a moment, wondering if she should answer. "Hello," she said, her voice tired but still gentle. On the other end of the line, a deep, formal voice introduced himself as Jonathan Harris, an attorney. He spoke quickly, almost as if he were reading from a script, mentioning something about an urgent matter that needed to be discussed in person. Sarah frowned, confused. "An attorney? Urgent? With me?" She couldn't understand what someone like him could possibly want with a waitress like her. The man insisted, saying it was important and that she needed to come to his office as soon as possible. With few options, Sarah agreed to the meeting, but her mind was already buzzing with questions. Had she done something wrong? Or was someone in trouble? On the scheduled day, Sarah left Ethan with a trusted neighbor and headed to the address Jonathan had given her. The office was in an imposing glass and steel building downtown, reflecting the gray sky. She felt small as she entered, like an outsider in a world that didn't belong to her. A well-dressed receptionist guided her to a room where Jonathan was waiting, seated behind a massive desk covered in papers. He was tall, with graying hair and an expensive suit, exuding an intimidating sense of authority. "Sarah Thompson," he began in a serious tone. "You recently saved a life." The words hit her like a stone thrown into a calm lake. She blinked, surprised. "Blood donation," she murmured, finally understanding. Jonathan nodded. "The man you helped was a very powerful businessman. He was on his deathbed when your blood reached him. Unfortunately, he didn't survive, but before he passed, he left clear instructions about what should be done with his fortune." Sarah felt her breath catch for a moment. "Fortune?" she repeated, incredulous. Jonathan explained that the man had left a generous inheritance to her as a way of thanking her for saving his life in his final moments. Sarah shook her head, trying to process it all. "But why? I didn't even know him." The lawyer simply shrugged. He valued acts of kindness, especially those from strangers. Sarah left the office feeling dazed, as if she were walking in a dream. A fortune for her. It was hard to believe. But as she made her way home, something inside her began to nag at her. There was something about this story that didn't feel right, like a sour note in an otherwise perfect melody. When she arrived home, Sarah found Ethan running around the yard, laughing as he chased a butterfly. She smiled, but the weight of that conversation still hung over her shoulders. She sat on the porch, watching her son play, and tried to organize her thoughts. Money. A huge amount of it. It could change everything for them. It could pay off debts, give Ethan the opportunities she never had, maybe even buy a bigger house. But at the same time, something didn't add up. Why would a man that rich choose to leave his fortune to a complete stranger? And why had he been on his deathbed? The more she thought about it, the more questions arose. Sarah knew she needed to find out more, but she also knew it could lead to complications she wasn't ready to face. That night, while Ethan slept soundly, Sarah lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Her mind spun like a carousel out of control. She remembered something her mother used to say, "Not everything that glitters is gold." Those words echoed in her head, making her question everything even more. The next day, she decided to do some research. She took the name of the businessman Jonathan had mentioned and started digging through online news articles. That's when something caught her attention. An old article, buried deep in the internet, linked the man's name to a financial scandal that had ruined several families years ago. Sarah felt a chill down her spine. She knew that case. Her own family had been affected by those ruthless decisions. Her father had lost his job, and the financial strain had ultimately destroyed their marriage. Now, decades later, the same man who had caused so much suffering was offering her a fortune. It felt like fate was playing a cruel joke. Sarah spent the next few days torn between disbelief and anger. How could she accept money from someone who had caused so much harm? But at the same time, how could she refuse something that could change her and Ethan's life for the better? It was a dilemma that consumed her entirely. She talked to a few close friends, but each had a different opinion. "Take the money," one said. "You deserve a fresh start." Another, however, argued, "That would be like forgiving the unforgivable. You'd be validating what he did." Sarah knew the final decision was hers, but that only made things harder. As she wrestled with her emotions, Sarah began to realize that this situation was about more than just money. It was about justice, forgiveness, and the kind of person she wanted to be. She remembered a quote she had once read in a book, "The true test of character is not in what you gain, but in what you choose to do with it." Those words stuck with her, a constant reminder that her actions would define who she was. She knew that whatever decision she made would have consequences, but she also knew she had to follow her heart. Slowly, Sarah started to see this situation as an opportunity to teach Ethan something important. He was too young to understand everything now, but one day, when he was older, she wanted him to know that life wasn't just about winning or losing. It was about making choices that reflected who you truly were. And with that in mind, Sarah began to form a plan. She still didn't know what her final decision would be, but she knew it had to be something she could live with every day when she looked in the mirror. Meanwhile, Jonathan called again, pressing for an answer. "We need to settle this soon," he said, his tone impatient. Sarah took a deep breath and asked for more time. "This is an important decision," she replied firmly. "I'm not going to rush just because it's convenient for you." The lawyer seemed surprised by her determination but didn't push further. Sarah hung up the phone feeling a little more in control of the situation. She knew there was still much to uncover, but she also knew she was on the right path. As the days passed, Sarah began to realize that this story wasn't just about her. It was about all the people who had been affected by that man's actions. And while she couldn't change the past, she could decide how to handle it. That thought brought a sense of clarity she hadn't felt in a long time. Maybe this was her chance to turn something bad into something good. Maybe this was her chance to prove that, even in the face of great difficulties, it was still possible to do the right thing. Sarah sat at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee growing cold beside her and an open notebook in front of her. She scribbled random thoughts as she tried to organize the mess in her mind. The weight of the decision ahead felt like a stone stuck in her shoe, impossible to ignore, yet difficult to remove. Ethan played on the floor with his toy cars, oblivious to the emotional storm raging inside his mother. Sarah watched him for a moment and smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "How can I explain this to him?" she wondered. "How can I do this without compromising everything I believe in?" The truth was, accepting the money would mean giving up a part of who she was. Sarah had always fought to raise Ethan with strong values: honesty, compassion, integrity. But how could she teach him to be just if she herself accepted something born from injustice? On the other hand, refusing the inheritance felt almost like throwing away a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to give her son a better life. It was a cruel choice, as if fate had decided to test her just when she was already exhausted from fighting. As she pondered, Sarah decided to visit her best friend, Clara, who always had a unique way of putting things into perspective. Clara was a practical woman, with little patience for sentimentality, but she also had a huge heart. When Sarah explained the situation, Clara pursed her lips, thoughtful. "You know, sometimes we need to think beyond black and white," she said, crossing her arms. Asterisk, accepting the money doesn't mean you're forgiving that man. You can use it to do good, to help others who suffered like you. Asterisk, Sarah blinked, surprised. That idea had never crossed her mind. That night, Sarah barely slept. Clara's words echoed in her mind like a mantra. Maybe there was another way to handle this. Maybe she could turn something bad into something good. She started imagining possibilities, donating part of the inheritance to charities, investing in support programs for families affected by financial crises, creating scholarships for underprivileged children. Each idea brought a little more clarity, like rays of sunlight breaking through heavy clouds. But there was still a bigger issue: what to tell the lawyer. Jonathan Harris didn't seem like the kind of person who would accept ambiguous answers. He expected clear, quick, definitive decisions. Sarah knew she had to be careful. She didn't want to appear indecisive or weak, but she also couldn't rush something so important. The next morning, she called Jonathan and scheduled another meeting. This time, she went prepared. She brought a list of questions and proposals, determined to take control of the situation. At the office, Jonathan greeted her with the same formality as before, but there was something different in his eyes. Perhaps curiosity, perhaps respect. Sarah started by explaining her conditions. "If I accept this inheritance," she said firmly, asterisk, "it won't just be for me. I want to use it to help others. To fix, at least in part, what that man did." Asterisk, Jonathan raised an eyebrow, visibly surprised. Asterisk, "You understand that this is unusual, right?" Asterisk, he asked. Sarah nodded. Asterisk, "I know. But I also know it's the right thing to do." Asterisk. The lawyer hesitated for a moment but eventually agreed. He said he would consult his colleagues and get back to her with an answer. Meanwhile, Sarah left the building feeling lighter, as if she had lifted a huge weight off her shoulders. She knew there were still obstacles ahead, but she also knew she was on the right path. For the first time in days, she felt like she had a direction. In the following days, Sarah started working on a detailed plan. She researched organizations that could benefit from the money, spoke with experts on how to maximize the impact of her donations, and even wrote a letter to Ethan, explaining everything that was happening. "I want you to understand," she wrote, asterisk, "that life isn't always fair. Sometimes, we receive things we don't deserve, and it's up to us to decide what to do with them. I hope that when you grow up, you'll be proud of the choices we made together." Asterisk. Meanwhile, Jonathan called back with good news. Sarah's proposal had been accepted. She would be responsible for distributing the inheritance as she saw fit, as long as she followed a few basic guidelines. Sarah felt a mix of relief and excitement. Finally, she had something concrete to work with. She immediately started taking action, reaching out to the organization she had selected and structuring the first steps of her plan. But deep down, Sarah knew this journey was about more than money. It was about redemption, about turning pain into purpose. She remembered something she had learned early in life. Asterisk, we can't change what happens to us, but we can choose how we respond. Asterisk, that idea guided every decision she made from that moment on. And while there were still challenges ahead, she knew she was ready to face them. Ethan, for his part, remained her greatest motivation. One afternoon, while they played at the park, he asked, asterisk, "Mom, why do people do bad things?" Asterisk, Sarah paused for a moment, surprised by the depth of the question. Then, she smiled and crouched down to his level. "Because we all make mistakes," she answered. Asterisk, but what really matters is what we do afterward. We can choose to fix things or let them stay broken. Asterisk, Ethan frowned, thinking, but then smiled. "I want to fix things," he said with conviction. Sarah felt her heart warm. Maybe, after all, that was the most important lesson of all.